I'm going to recreate this reel from Devin Jatho, and this is actually part 2 of this series. The response from you guys was amazing. Thanks to you all, I got to 30,000 subscribers, which is wild, which is also why I'm gonna give away this Mac Mini. And I promise you, at 50,000 subscribers and 100,000 subscribers, I'm gonna do something crazy. It's actually a life goal of mine to reach the 100,000 subscribers and to inspire 100,000 editors. So hopefully one day. But for now, the Mac Mini. So to win this, you of course need to be subscribed to the channel, but you also need to be in the Social Creator Club Pro or free. In both communities, I posted a link with a really simple form, which you can fill in if you want to win it. Now let's jump into this video. So I'm here in After Effects, and let's first go through our example. Basically, you have this text animation that then swipes up and shows a screen recording of a lot of Instagram Reels. What is really cool is that it's basically cut out and there's some transparency on it too. Of course, we're gonna recreate that. Then it goes to white and then it pops back. Some more text animation, and then we see all these videos fly in. And there's also like a shadow, almost like a blur at the bottom. I think that effect is really cool. Then it will highlight one that goes to the center. This mountain icon will pop up. This text comes in. It moves to the left, and then we also have this cartoon illustration move in. It zooms out, and then the video comes back. Let's see how far we can get. I'm first going to create a new composition, and I do that by just creating a new composition. Of course, we can also work in the previous composition. For now, I'm going to use the Social Media Portrait HD. I'm going to change my frame rate to 25 frames per second. You don't have to do this, but my footage is 25 frames per second. That is important for later on. Then I quickly imported my footage, and this is just some background video. You can also just use a dark solid, or you can use your own footage. And like always, you can also download the assets in the free community. And if you want the template or this project file, I will of course post this in my pro community. Let's animate the text first. Now, of course, we can copy it over from our previous video, but we can also quickly recreate it. Basically, you can just go to the type tool, type text here. Then I'm gonna select all of our text by pressing Command A, and let's make this maybe medium. I'm gonna make it a bit bigger, maybe a bit more sizing like that. That's cool. Let's select it and let's go to Align and center it. And let's move this a bit down by just holding Shift and using the arrow keys. That's cool. Now for this effect, I'm just gonna use the blur in by word effect. You can just double click it and let's play this. And as you can see, it's already this really cool animation. Of course, you can always adjust your animation by opening up your text and opening up the animation and going into the range selector and then advanced. But for now, I'm just gonna keep it like this. If you wanna have a certain word in a different color, just like in our example, you can just select that word by double clicking on your text and then selecting it and then just changing the color. And some color science theory, I always like to not go fully in the top right because that will really hurt your eyes. Going a bit between something like that, and then we have our text. I'm also going to make it a bit more thick. Now for the next part, I'm going to move this text up, and in the meantime, in the background, I will put a screen recording. Now to do this, it's actually quite simple. I can just duplicate this footage. Then I'm gonna import a screen recording that I took. And this is a really simple screen recording on an iPhone, but you can use any phone for this. Most phones have a screen recording feature. I'm just gonna scale it up by pressing S. And let's see how I'm gonna position it. Maybe a bit like this, maybe move it a bit down by hitting the arrow keys, just like that. That works. Now let's first drag this footage down below our second video that we created. I'm also going to name this top video and this bottom video. Just to make it clear, you don't have to do this. You can rename things by just hitting enter on your keyboard. Then I'm going to key myself out, and it's basically make sure to cut ourselves out. Now, of course, you can use CapCut for this. It's actually a really good tool to use. I think CapCut isn't the best for advanced editing, but it is really great for their keying tool. But for now, I'm going to use it in After Effects because I'm sure with this background, it should work. Basically, we just go to the Roto brush tool. I'm just gonna double click this video. Let's resize this a bit so we can see what's happening. And then we can just draw basically what we want to select. So I'm just gonna roughly do an outline. We can always adjust it a bit later on. Let's see. No. So now I hold Alt, and then I'm just gonna draw on this. There we go. And I'm gonna do the same on the right. This should work pretty well. I do see here that the comp 1 is also masked out. And actually this hoodie is a custom hoodie, which I'm giving away every month in the pro community. It's a really nice hoodie. Anyway, enough promotion. Let's add this table too, and then I'm happy with it. Now what we're gonna do is basically at the bottom, you see all these arrows. This is basically what it's gonna render. If you have a really long video, it will take a really long time. So I'm just gonna drag this out a bit to the right and also a bit to the left, just making sure we don't have to render that much. Now what you can do is you can just go through it frame by frame, or what you do is you just hit freeze. And if we hit freeze, it will basically analyze all the frames. If a certain frame isn't that great, we can always adjust it. And also don't forget, this doesn't have to be perfect. Most of the times this keying goes quite quick. So if there are mistakes, most people won't see it. Now that we're done, we can just close this, and you might have noticed nothing has really changed. But if you now turn off the bottom video, you will see that it's cut out. And that's perfectly what we want. Basically what I'm now gonna do, I'm gonna turn on the screen recording to see what we just did. And I'm gonna make my top video a bit transparent. So just press T for transparent. Let's set this opacity to 90%. Later on, I'm also probably gonna keyframe that. That's cool. Now we're gonna animate it in. And in my opinion, the best way to do this is basically link the screen recording to the text. Now just make sure that the screen recording is outside of our screen. So we can just move this by holding shift. There we go. So it's outside of the frame. And because our screen recording is linked to our text, we can just animate the text by pressing P for position, setting a keyframe, enabling motion blur. Let's go a bit further. And now we're just gonna drag this second parameter to the left, hold shift, and let's do this again. And to just make sure that this screen recording is in the screen. Maybe something like this. Perfect. Now let's select these keyframes and hit F9 or right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. This will make it a bit more smooth. It's cool. That looks really dope. Now I might add some motion blur to the screen recording too. Now the swipes in the screen recording go a bit too slow in my opinion. And we can just change that by right clicking on the screen recording time stretch, and let's set this to maybe 40, and then it will basically scroll a lot quicker. It's exactly what I want. And then after a couple seconds, I'm just gonna set a keyframe on the opacity of the top video and fade it out so we see the full screen recording. And then I'm gonna go to layer, new, solid, set this to white. Okay, let's drag this on top of everything. Let's press T for transparency, set a keyframe, drag this out a bit and set it to 0. Basically we'll now just fade in, and that's exactly what we want. And then after this animation is done, I'm just going to select all of our layers except the bottom video and just cut them off. So holding Alt and then bracket. On most keyboards this is next to the enter key, so we'll just snap back to our video. I look a bit scary here. Now another text animation here, and we can just duplicate the text that we created before, just move this over because the animation is exactly the same. So this will animate in like that. And then to go back to our example, as you can see, it will snap to this dark blue background, and all of these videos, you can also use images, will pop up. Let's create this scene. I'm excited. So I'm just gonna go to layer, new, solid. Okay, let's drag this on top. Hitting Alt, left bracket, go to effects, and then we're gonna add a gradient ramp. There we go. And let's set the start color to blue, maybe a bit like lighter, something like this. And then the end color to also blue, but then really dark, something like that, almost black. It's cool. And of course we can also rename this to blue or dark blue background. There we go. Now we actually need 12 videos. I don't have those. I do have 12 screenshots. It doesn't really matter. So let's say we have a video like this, which is not the video that we want, but press S for scale, drag this down a bit so we have a bit more room to play with. Now to make it rounded, so like have rounded corners, you can just go to the rounded rectangle tool by holding your mouse down and clicking on the rectangle tool. So it changes to the rounded rectangle tool. Then double click on this and it will automatically make it rounded. Now I'm just going to delete this layer. I'm just going to use the screenshots from our previous part. So I need 12 screenshots, just selecting one and then holding shift and then selecting the top one. You can select all of these screenshots and you can just drag them in. Then on the top one, I'm just going to double click to make a rounded mask, as you can see. And then I'm just going to copy this over by pressing Command C on Mac or Control C on Windows. And then Control V or Command V on Mac. Paste it. So the mask is pasted on all of these layers. Now I'm also going to select it, press S for scale, and I'm going to scale them up a bit, not too much, but maybe something like this. Then go to the selection tool, and of course we can use an extension or plugin, but there are only 12, so it should be quite quick to just drag them out to the position where we want to. I'm going to turn this one off, and I'm going to continue selecting the rest. Move this one, and it's almost like a deck of cards, right? Like we're just dragging them out. There we go. Let's turn the other one back on. And what you might have noticed if you zoom in is that they're not really aligned well. And I do want it to be aligned, so I'm just going to select these by holding Shift and just selecting this first row, then going to align and then centering it. Then we can even move it a bit. There we go. And I'm going to do the same with the middle row and the same with the last row. It's already way better. Then to align the middle, we can do the same to just select the top row first, then aligning it vertically and doing the same with the others. And you don't have to do this, but trust me, things like this will really... Basically what a lot of animators forget is that as an editor or animator, you're almost like a designer too. So if you mess this up and they're all not in a nice grid, they're all on like different heights, it will just look messy. Now, I'm really happy with this. I'm just now gonna animate them. Basically what we want is to animate them in. And to do this, I'm just gonna go a bit further around here. Let's select them all, press P for position, set a keyframe. Let's go a bit more to the front and let's just drag them down. Of course, hold Shift so it goes straight down. There we go. Then I'm gonna select all of the keyframes. Then I'm gonna hit F9. And while we're at it, also enable motion blur. And that's already cool because we have a cool animation where they come up quite smoothly. If I play this now, as you can see, it's quite a cool animation. I think it goes a bit too slow, but we can always adjust this a bit. If you hold Alt, you can actually resize this a bit to something like this, so it goes a bit quicker. Now that's cool. Now I want to offset them. So basically they're already in the right order, so we can just like adjust these a bit, a couple seconds like that. And the same with these, and this doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe a bit more delay here. Last two layers quickly like that. And if we play it now, you will see that it has way more organic flow to it. Makes it look way cooler. Now I do want the bottom row or the bottom part to be a bit darker and also have a bit of a blur. And the easiest way to do this is to go to Layer, New, Solid, and I'm just gonna create a black solid. Okay. Then going to the rectangle tool by holding your mouse down on the rounded rectangle tool. Then let's just drag this out, press F for feather, set this to 1000 and go to T for transparency and maybe then like dialing it down a bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe something like 75. And I'm just going to make sure that it's only starting when we also have this background. So hit Alt left bracket. That's really cool. I'm going to create a new layer, Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Also set that to be starting right at this point. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to this. There we go. Let's go a bit further so I can see what's happening here. Let's increase this a bit, not too much, maybe 25 or something. That's cool. And then we're just gonna mask this by using the rectangle tool. So let's just drag this out, maybe also feathering this a bit by pressing F, maybe set it to like 100. It doesn't have to be 1000. And that's a really cool effect. As you can see, it will just add a bit of depth to the image. Now going back to our example, we basically want to drop all of these and make this one scale up. So in my case, I'm gonna select them all except the first one. We can just do this in our layer panel. So let's just go down, hold Shift and click. Select the first one first, and then you select the last one first while holding Shift. Now we just need to set another keyframe. So I'm just gonna click the keyframe icon and then let's go a bit further, maybe to around here, and let's move them down a bit, something like this. It's perfect. And press T for transparency, setting a keyframe, and then we'll set this to 0%. We'll go a bit more towards the beginning where they were up again, and then we set it to 100%. So basically we'll just fade out and it will move down. As you can see, cool animation. Then I'm just gonna select the first one. I'm gonna open it and I'm gonna go into the transform. And let's set a keyframe for the scale and set a keyframe for the position. by clicking on this icon on the left. Then let's go a bit further. And then I can just go to align, center it, move it down a bit by holding shift and scaling it up a bit. Not too much, something like that. Of course, I'm gonna ease this by hitting F9. Let's play this quickly. That is already really cool. I might smooth this down a bit by selecting it and going into the graph editor. Then we can zoom in and we just have to drag this keyframe out a bit, maybe something like this. Selecting these ones also. It's already a bit smoother. I'm happy with that. Now let's animate this into a icon. And in my opinion, the easiest way to do this is to just go to the rounded rectangle tool again. Make sure the stroke is set to 5 pixels and wide. The fill is set to gradient, and let's go into the gradient and let's change these colors to first maybe like a bit lighter bluish, and then it goes to really dark bluish. Okay, if I drag this, we have this really cool shape. I can just make sure that it's covering the whole image. As you can see, it's a bit transparent. This is a bug in the new After Effects. We just have to go into the gradient fill and setting it to 100%. You also can see that this ugly gradient will appear. It's way too harsh. We want to smooth this out. So I can just go to the selection tool, make sure the gradient fill is selected, and then we can just move this a bit and make it really smooth. Something like that makes it way better. Buttery smooth. I'm happy with that. And then I can just press T for transparency and just fading this in. So setting a keyframe, let's go a bit further, set this to 0, and basically making this fade in once it's there, just like that. Cool. Now, of course, we need our icon, and I do have an icon for this, and that's this one. It is still black, so it's hard to see, and I can actually just use the effect invert to invert it to make it white. If you want to have it another color, you can also use the tint effect. And of course, you can also use a glow or deep glow on this. For now, I'm just going to keep it like this. Click on it, press S to scale it down a bit. Something like that. That's cool. Now we just need to fade this in too. So press T for opacity. And I'm just going to make sure these keyframes are somewhat the same. So it basically goes to hundreds like that. We can even animate this a bit later. That's cool. Now going back to our example, you can see this text pop up. Then it goes to the left and then this guy pops up. It zooms out and then we have an arrow animation. Trust me, this is all not too hard to do. Let's do the text animation first. I can just go to the text tool and type interest peak, select it, make it white, and also probably like semi-bold italic. Let's align this to the center and let's move this a bit up, something like this. I also want to move this below our black solid because this black solid is our shadow. So it basically comes out of the shadow. Let's press P for position and set a keyframe. I'm just gonna go a bit further to the back, maybe somewhere like here, drag this keyframe out, then hold shift and slide this value down. Let's add a motion blur to this and select all of these keyframes and then hit F9. Now this maybe goes a bit too quick. Maybe I'm gonna smooth it out a bit by going into our graph editor and then dragging this last keyframe handle a bit more towards the front, making it a bit more smooth. I think that looks really cool. Now to move this all to the right so we can make place for our new icon, this is actually quite easy. But before I do that, I'm first gonna do a couple things. I'm gonna duplicate all of our elements. So interest peak, the shape layer. So interest peak and the shape layer. The icon we don't have to do because I need a different icon anyway. Let's just duplicate this. That's cool. Now I'm gonna go to layer, new, null object. I'm gonna call this mover. You don't have to call it, but it's always easier. Then I'm only going to use our first element, so that's the interest peak and the shape layer and the mission PNG. I'm going to link that to our mover. Let's set a position. Let's set a position by pressing P, setting a keyframe, and going a bit further, and let's move this out of the way. And as you can see, our duplicate will reveal itself. This will all make sense in a bit. I'm just going to move this to maybe just out of the frame, something like that. And now the cool thing is this is our duplicate. So this is basically the shape that we created and the text that we created. Now I'm just going to add our hook icon. We of course need to add the invert effect to this. Press S for scale this down a bit. I'm also going to go to align and center this, move it up a bit, something like that. Yeah, that's cool. Of course, we need to change the text in a bit. The cool thing now is if we select our fishing, our shape layer 2 and our interest peak 2, and now link it to our mover and basically have our animation As you can see, we do see this screenshot pop up. We do have to make sure that this is cut off. Let's go to this screenshot. And actually, after this is like faded out, I can just cut this off by hitting Alt right bracket. Now, as you can see, intro speak will come in and then it will move to the right just how we want. Now, I do want to have some motion blur. I also want to make this mover position a bit more smooth. And I'm going to enable motion blur on our shapes and also on the images. There we go. Now it's already way smoother. I really love this. I think it's such a cool animation. And why I'm teaching you this method is because this is so much quicker than hand animating all these parts, hand animating these parts. If you incorporate this in your workflow, you can really animate quicker. Now we can just go to the text tool, type hook here, for example, if we want to change this text. And now let's animate our character. I'm really excited for this. So for this, I have this really cool guy that's looking on his phone. I'm just gonna make sure that this shadow that we created is just on top of everything. It makes it easier to animate this. So let's select this character. And what I'm going to do is basically make it pop up from the bottom. And to do this is really easy. Just set a position keyframe, drag this out, and then let's move this down by holding shift. There we go. So we'll just pop up like that. Quite an easy animation. I might scale it a bit. So press S for scale, making sure that the bottom part of his body is not visible. So let's move this down a bit, maybe even scaling it up a bit more. There we go. Now, as you can see, the word hook is not visible anymore. So we need to just select the word hook and just move this on top of this, making sure it's still visible. We can also make this character a bit transparent by pressing T and then setting the opacity to maybe 90. And of course, I'm also gonna link this to our mover, because if we're gonna animate it later on, then we just know for sure this is linked. Let's press P for position, select these keyframes, make them a bit more smooth, and of course motion blur. Now what I also want to do is I want to make his head move, and I'm going to use the puppet position pin tool, which is in the top of your toolbar. You can just select it, then make sure the mesh show is enabled, and then I'm just going to click on his head, and let's add another point maybe here in the body, and I think that should already work. Now, actually, what I'm going to do is make sure that there's another one here at the bottom. And now, as you can see, we can move his head, which is really cool. And I'm just going to make sure that a couple frames down, he just looks over his phone. So let's just move this down a bit. I think that's really cool. So there's just a bit of movement in this, right? Then after a while, I'm just going to press T, set a keyframe, then go a couple frames further, and I'm just going to fade him out. And while he fades out, I'm also going to move this whole composition. So just go to the mover, let's set a keyframe here, dragging this to the left, and then dragging this to the right. That's cool. So basically we'll just move it to the center again. Now I'm also gonna use the scale keyframe. So press S and enable keyframing, press U to see our keyframes, and let's drag this one to the left. I'm gonna scale it a bit down, so we just have a bit more of an overview. Then we might need to move this a bit, something like that, so they're more centered. That's cool. Now, of course, select these bottom keyframes and also easy ease them by hitting F9 or right-clicking Keyframe Assistant, easy ease. So we have this smooth animation, and now we just need an arrow. And you might have guessed it, I have a arrow. We just need to add an invert to this. So go to invert, perfect. And let's scale this down a bit, something like this. I'm going to center this a bit. There we go. And of course, link this to the mover. Now we do want to animate this too. So let's move this below our shapes, because basically what we want to do is make it reveal behind the hook. So press P for position, set a keyframe, drag this out, and let's drag this arrow behind the hook. And then also press T for opacity, also set a keyframe for that. Let's also drag this out and then setting it to 0. So basically it will fade in a bit while it also animates. I'm gonna add motion blur to this, press U, and I'm also gonna easy ease this. And then you get something like this. And if you want to see a next part, do let me know. Also, if you want to win the Mac Mini, do join the Pro Club or the Free Club. Then again, thanks for all the support, all of the people that subscribe, but also just watches my video. Of course, an extra thank you for the people that are in the Pro Club. And then like always, I'll see you next time. Bye.